and welcome to our show on biochemistry of cells. We've already talked about some basic chemistry, so let's see how we're going to put that into practice here. Okay, let's first start of how do we use some of this stuff? Organic molecules. First, let me back up and just say an organic molecule, just a reminder, organic, when we hear the word organic, we want to think carbon. And so normally we think, it's more expensive, it's made without hormones, or, raised without hormones or grown without pesticides. But really, organic means it's made with carbon, or it has carbon, sorry. So, organic molecules, sugar is an organic molecule, and we consume a lot of it. Cellulose, remember OSE, when you see that at the end of a word, it's typically a sugar, and it's found in cell walls. And so because of that, it is the most organic, abundant organic compound on Earth because there's a lot of trees and they're really big. Okay, uses of organic molecules, look at here. We have the DNA, piece of DNA. So typical cell in our body has about 2 meters of DNA in a cell. And of course, cows. Cows always have to play a role, and they produce a lot of gas. That's 200 pounds of methane gas each year. And methane, the chemical composition is CH4. So cows, lots of cow farts. All right, just some reminders about water. We've already talked about water, but I want to go back, revisit it just quickly here. Water, an organism is made up about 60 to 90% of water. So a lot of us and living organisms have water in them. Water is used in most reactions in the body, and water is called the universal solvent. We talked a little bit about it being the magical substance there. Okay, and some basic properties. We talked about the polarity, the north and south pole, the opposites attract. Remember, with water, you have that, it's a polar molecule, partial positive charge on the hydrogen, partial negative charge on the oxygen, and so you end up with this, attraction between the water molecules. Then you have this cohesiveness. Remember, molecules that are the same will stick to each other, the water molecules that are the same, and then we have adhesiveness, where you have different molecules, different substances sticking to other things. So both of them are sticking, but with cohesiveness, they're sticking to each other, and adhesiveness, they're sticking to other things. And the example we used in class was the Band-Aid. And if we took a Band-Aid and stuck it on itself, that would be cohesiveness, but not very effective. And so they're not called cohesive bandages, they're called adhesive bandages, because remember the song, I am stuck on Band-Aid because Band-Aid stuck on me. Because the Band-Aid, one substance, is stuck on me, another substance. And so they're stuck on adhesive. That's why they're called adhesive bandages. So, and then lastly, the other one that's real important with water is that surface tension. And so creates like that skin on the top of water. And that surface tension, if we laid a paper clip on the top there of all these little Mickey Mouse water molecules, that paper clip could just stay, could float at the surface of the water. All right, carbon-based molecules. Let's go back to the organics. Remember, organic, carbon. All right. Now, although a cell is mostly the water, the rest of it is mainly carbon-based molecules. And when we talk about organic chemistry, that's what we're studying. We are looking at carbon-based compounds in organic chemistry. Okay, carbon is very versatile. It has all these different kinds of bonds that it can have. Because it has 4 electrons in its outer shell, and how many does it want in order to be happy? It wants 8 out there. So carbon can share its electrons of other atoms to form up to 4 covalent bonds. Remember, a covalent bond, co meaning together, valent is talking about those valence electrons. So carbon has 4 out there, so it could do lots of really cool things with its bonding. It can have a single bond, it can have a double bond, and woohoo, it can have a triple bond there. So lots of different kind of bonding action that can go on with carbons. Now, a hydrocarbon, I know this is going to sound crazy when you see it, but they are the simplest compounds and they contain hydrogen and carbon. Whoa, boy, you know what? I tell you what, sometimes things are just so simple, and that's just one of them. A hydrocarbon contains hydrogen and carbon. All right, so carbon can use those bonds. Remember, it's got those 4 electrons out there. It wants 8. So it can make these, it can attract to other carbons, and it can form these an endless diversity of carbon skeletons. You can have very long chains. They can be branched. See how here they can be straight, or they can be branched and go all over the place. They can form these double bonds in different places, and they can form these ring structures. Okay, some examples of large hydrocarbons that you'd be familiar with. First of all, the gas in our cars. That's a hydrocarbon, and sometimes we hear them when we talk about emissions and we talk about environmental issues. We're talking about the burning of hydrocarbons. And then, of course, this guy, when he's done pumping his gas, he's munching on a fry there. So the energy for our bodies, the hydrocarbons of fat molecules provide energy for our bodies. All right, so let's look at some polymers. Poly means many. Okay, so it would make sense that giant molecules are polymers because there's going to be a lot of them. So these very large ones are called polymers, and they are built from lots of monomers. That's where the mers comes from. So instead of mono meaning one, we put all those one structures together and we get a poly one. And what us biologists, we like to call them macromolecules because we like to use those big words. So macro meaning big. Get it? We like to use the big words. Okay, whatever. So macromolecules there. Okay, so let's look at some different examples of these polymers, these very large molecules. Proteins, and they're just folded all over themselves. They're lipids, those fats, and then the nucleic acids, DNA, RNA, and carbohydrates. Glycogen is one example, but there's lots of them. Okay, so most of these macromolecules are polymers. So they're made up of many monomers. Here we have a perfect example of DNA. This is the sugar, and here is the phosphate group, and here is the amino acid. So polymers are made up of stringing together many molecules called monomers. And here's a nucleic acid monomer. Okay, how do we get them to stick together? So we have lots of them, that's great, but how do they stick together? Well, one way that they stick together is through this process called dehydration synthesis. Think about this word, dehydration. If you're hydrating, if coach tells you you better hydrate, then that means you better drink some water, right? So in dehydration synthesis, you are going to, synthesis means to make. So you are going to make something new by getting rid of a water, dehydrating it, okay? So we're going to look at these two functional groups right here, and then what happens is the hydrogen from this sugar and the hydroxide group from this sugar are removed. And if we take a hydroxide and a hydrogen, we get a water. So water is removed from these two, and these two sugars here bond together and make a double sugar. That's good stuff, isn't it? All right, now we want to break them down. How do we break them down? So now we have these big, huge, giant molecules, and we want to break them down. Well, we do just the opposite. If we put them together by removing a water, now we're going to add a molecule of water. So here we have them together, bonded together. We're going to add a water in. So here we have an OH, but we're going to add another two hydrogens and an oxygen. So here we have that OH. We added a hydrogen, and here the OH. So now we have water added and splits them apart. Lysis means to break apart. So hydrolysis is the splitting apart with water. All right. Now the macromolecules. There's four categories of large molecules in the cells. That's carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids. Know these. They're very important. These are the four biggies. The four, I did it again, the four biggies. All right. All right, let's look at the carbohydrates. Sugar in soft drinks, sugar all over the place. That's a carb, that's a carbohydrate. Large starch molecules in pasta and potatoes. That's why when people try to say that potatoes are a veggie, well, they really are carbohydrate there. All right, disaccharide. Di means two. Saccharide, sac is sugar. So disaccharide is two sugars. So if we have sucrose made up of glucose and fructose, look at all that OSE. If you don't remember that OSE is sugar after this, then I don't know. Maltose is composed of two glucose molecules. Lactose is made up of galactose and glucose. Now, the only reason why that's real important for now is this baby right here. I wanted you to see glucose. Glucose is our friend, and we will study glucose a lot this year, so just get to know glucose. Glucose is a ring structure. You can see it in this ring, and depending on where these different functional groups are hanging off of the different carbons will change this molecule. So this is what glucose actually looks like. Now, a polysaccharide is many sugars. And when we look at it, this is called a complex carbohydrate. So if you've ever heard someone talk about that you want to have a complex carbohydrate instead of a simple sugar, this is what they're talking about. It's lots of these. Remember, through a dehydration synthesis, we have put all these monomers together, and they're all connected in this big, long chain. All right, some examples of polysaccharides, many sugars. We have glucose is the monomer, and that is what starch looks like, and what glycogen looks like. And here we have cellulose. Remember, that's in the plants. All right, glycogen is in the muscles, and starch is the potatoes. So right here we have three examples of these polysaccharides. All right, we're going to stop here, and then we will talk about lipids coming right up. Whew, hold on to your seat.